Mark, are we ready?
Good evening. Today is August 7th, 2023. It is about 7:01 p.m. and this is the Troy City Council. I am Council Pro Tem Bobby Phillips and the rest of the council folks here. Tonight we're going to silence your cell phones, please.
That was a reminder.
Anyway, we're going to be led in our invocation by Councilman Jeff Whidden, and then we have a couple of Boy Scouts that are going to come on up to the podium here and lead us in the pledge. After Mr. Whidden, come on up to the podium, please.
Good evening. Today as we meet, we ask for guidance to do the people's work. We ask for safety of our first responders, our teachers, and our military personnel. And we ask for prosperity for the city we hold so dear.
We have two Boy Scouts from Boy Scout Troop 1033. We have Gavin Romberger and, I'm sorry, I covered up the name, Ben Knosman with us tonight. So you gentlemen are going to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mrs. Knight, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Phillips?
Yes, here.
Mrs. Marshall? Here. Mr. Schilling?
Present.
Mr. Rozelle?
Yes, here, present.
Mr. Whidden?
Here.
Mr. Pierce?
Present.
Mrs. Snee? Here. Mr. Sievert? Mr. Twist?
Move to excuse Mr. Sievert.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Rozelle and a second by Mr. Whidden to excuse Mr. Sievert. Mrs. Knight, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Rozelle?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert is excused.
Move to excuse Mr. Twist.
We have a motion by Mrs. Snee and a
I'll second.
second by Mr. Whidden to excuse Mr. Twist. Mrs. Knight, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Rozelle?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Twist is excused.
Thank you. This evening we have a recycling award, and our Vice Mayor, Bill Lutz, will be presenting the award.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips.
The floor is yours.
Miss Amy Lewis here this evening. Amy, please come forward. It is my pleasure to present the quarterly Look Who is Recycling Award to you on behalf of Rumpke. This is a voluntary program, which folks go on the website and say why they recycle, and the good folks at Rumpke make a choice of who they felt was the best entry, and you won this quarter. Congratulations. Not going to embarrass you. And I'm going to say everything you said about recycling.
Absolutely.
That's wonderful. Ms. Lewis of Fort Hill Drive said recycling builds a healthy path for not only our own futures, but also for our children's futures. Within that goal, recycling also builds a better environment for all living creatures who share this world with us, being able to set an example to younger generations and build responsibility within the path we help guide them in life. Recycling may seem like a small task to focus on now, but in the lives of futures, it will have major results for the world we share. Wonderful words.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'm usually happier when I tell them to sneaking up on them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And Mrs. Knight, would you please read a summary of the minutes of the July 17, 2023 meeting?
Minutes of Council, July 17, 2023. Committee reports. There was a committee report of the whole. Community and Economic Development Committee recommended that ordinance number 03723 be adopted. Also recommended approval of a professional services agreement with American Structure Point related to updating the comprehensive plan and zoning code. Finance Committee recommended legislation be prepared regarding waiving a tap-in fee for improvements at 9 West Main Street. Streets and Sidewalks Committee recommended legislation be prepared authorizing agreement with LJB regarding downtown safety and streetscape project design. Committee recommended legislation be prepared, authorizing an OPWC application for funding related to a roundabout at Adams Street, Riverside Drive. Page. Resolution number R42, 2020, agreement with the Structure Point Update Comprehensive Plan, first reading and adopted. Resolution number R43, 2023. Waive a tap-in fee for the building at 9 West Main Street was given first reading and adopted. Resolution number R44, 2023. A professional services agreement related to the downtown safety and streetscape renovation project design was given first reading and adopted. Resolution number R45, 2023. Participating in an OPWC grant related to a roundabout project was given first reading and was adopted. Ordinance number 037, 2023, a rezoning, was given third reading and was adopted. Following comments, council adjourned at 7:34 p.m.
Kim, how does the council wish to
Move to
proceed?
approve. Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Rozell and a second by Mr. Schilling to approve the minutes as read. Mrs. Knight, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Minutes are approved.
Thank you, ma'am. Tonight we have committee reports. Our first committee is the Law and Ordinance Committee, and read by the chair, Mrs. Snee.
Thank you. Committee members Phillips and Sievert met August 3rd to consider a moratorium on specific uses in the downtown riverfront overlay, or DRO, district. A moratorium would allow staff time to perform a detailed analysis and provide any recommendations regarding amending uses to further protect the DRO district. It is the recommendation of this committee that legislation be prepared establishing a moratorium of 270 days on the uses listed on the attached within the DRO boundary. To enable immediate review, this committee supports emergency legislation. And this is respectfully submitted by Mr. Phillips, Mr. Sievert, and myself as chair.
Thank you. Do we have any comments or questions by council?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
I watched my question is that the DRO program is a voluntary program. So do these uses that are being under the moratorium, do they go with the DRO or do they go with the underlying zoning?
Now, go with there'll be any applications for these particular uses that are within the boundaries of the DRO. So they would still, to even be considered under normal circumstances, have to comply and be a permitted use under one of the 12 zoning districts.
So, for example, if there was a permitted use on the list that was in the B3 district, as long as they weren't going for DRO, they could still apply for that permitted use as a B3?
No. If it's on this list, then it is part of the moratorium, and then we would look at whether or not it should be as part of the DRO. We're not sure how to handle that yet, which is why we're asking for 9 months rather than the usual more
90
consistent
days.
90 to 6 months, 180 days. So we're not sure how we want to handle that yet, which is why we're asking for the moratorium. So if they are within the boundaries of the map of the DRO, that's what...
So all of those uses, regardless if they're permitted principal use by the underlying zoning, is being taken away?
It's being under the moratorium, yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Snee, you have a liquor permit to read also, if you would.
Yes, the Ohio Division of Liquor Control has transmitted the notice of the transfer of the existing C1, C2, and D6 liquor permits from the name of Dad's Carryout, LLC, 249 Union Street, first floor, to the name of Jasmine K. Gill with the same address. The Troy Police Department has not recommended an objection or hearing request be filed. And that has been announced.
Any questions or comment on council? Thank you. The next committee we have is the Safety and Health Committee, and Mr. Whidden, can you read that?
This committee met on July 24th regarding the updates to the Miami County Hazard Mitigation Plan. Troy has participated in this plan since 2006 and approved it with regular updates. to receive FEMA funding due to damages from certain disasters, such as the city received following the windstorm damage from Hurricane Ike in 2008. Troy must be part of the county plan or adopt its own. It is the recommendation of this committee that legislation be prepared authorizing the city continue to participate in the Miami County Hazard Mitigation Plan and to authorize the Director of Public Service and Safety to execute documents related thereto. This is respectfully submitted by Mrs. Marshall, myself, and Mr. Twist as chair.
Any questions of anyone on council? Okay. Moving along to the Streets and Sidewalks Committee, we do have 2 reports tonight. The committee met on July 24 regarding the final assessment related to the new and replacement sidewalk and shared use path within the South Stanfield Road Reconstruction Project Phase 1. As the project is complete, approving the final assessments will allow the city to provide information regarding the assessments to the property owners. The property owners will then determine whether or not to pay the assessment amount or have it placed on the property tax for collection over a 5-year period. It is the recommendation of the committee that legislation be prepared approving the final assessments for the South Stanfield Reconstruction Project Phase 1, sidewalks and shared use path. The committee supports emergency legislation to meet the September 22, 2023 assessment filing deadline of the County Auditor's Office and is respectfully submitted by Mr. Pierce, Mrs. Snee, and myself as chair. Any comments or questions on this report? Okay. Moving along, the committee also met on July 24 to consider the recommendation of the Troy Planning Commission that council accept the dedication of .847 acres of Part in Lot 11561 and the acceptance of an easement along 2980 Fenner Road. It is the recommendation of the committee that legislation be prepared accepting the recommendation of the Troy Planning Commission that council accepts the dedication of .847 acres of Part in Lot 11561 and the acceptance of a 5-foot utility easement which are part of the Swank Development Plat. And this again is respectfully submitted by Mr. Pierce, Mrs. Snee, and myself as chair. Any other comments or questions on this item?
I just had a question.
Yes, sir.
It's probably a typo. The address in yours is different than the address on the agenda.
I don't have it written.
2980 or
Mrs. Knight,
1980?
can you settle that discrepancy of written document versus the electronic document?
I think it's 1980.
1980?
Yes.
Okay, 1980 is the corrected?
Yes.
Okay, Fenner Road address. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Let me scroll back up here to my agenda. At this time, anyone in the audience has a 2-minute time period to comment on any of the items that have come before council on these reports this evening. If you'd like to comment or question anything about them, please step up to the microphone, state your name and address, and you have 2 minutes to say what you need to say about that, and Mr. Kerber, our city attorney, is our timekeeper. So if you have any, please come on down. Seeing none, thank you. Moving along into resolutions and this evening, and we have Resolution R46-2023. Mrs. Knight, would you please read that?
Resolution number R46-2023, resolution to continue participation in a hazard mitigation plan in conjunction with the Miami County Emergency Management Agency. This is a continuation of this plan, and this is the first reading.
Move to suspend.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Whidden and a second by Mr. Pierce to suspend the rules. Mrs. Knight, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Whidden to approve and a second by Mr. Schilling. Mrs. Knight, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Resolution is approved.
Thank you. Mr. Titterington, I'm just trying to give Sue time to catch up with the paperwork there. Appreciate the notice. Moving into ordinances, we have ordinance 41, 2023 tonight, and Mrs. Knight, would you please read that ordinance?
Ordinance number 041, 2023. An ordinance enacting sections 1151.16 of the zoning code of the City of Troy, Ohio, and amending sections 1133.02, 1143.13, 1143.16, 1143.18, 1149.04, 1151.04, and 1151.14, the zoning code of the City of Troy, Ohio. These amendments have been recommended by the Troy Planning Commission. There will be a public hearing at the next council meeting. This is the first reading.
Thank you. We'll go to a second reading on August 21. Moving along to ordinance 42, 2023. Mrs. Knight, would you please?
Ordinance number 042, 2023. Ordinance levying assessments for South Stanfield Road Reconstruction Project, Phase 1, sidewalk and shared use plan, and declaring an emergency. This is the first reading. The emergency is to have any assessments filed by the county. Deadline is September 22.
Move to suspend.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Twist and a second by Mr. Schilling to I'm sorry, Mr. Rozell.
Either bill.
And a second by Mr. Schilling
I can tell.
to suspend the rules. Mrs. Knight, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Second.
We have a motion to adopt by Mr. Whidden and a second by Mr. Schilling. And Mrs. Knight, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
Thank you. Moving along to ordinance 43-2023. Mrs. Knight, would you please read that one?
Ordinance number 043, 2023, ordinance accepting the Swank Development Plat, the dedication of right-of-way and a 5-foot utility easement located along Fenner Road in the city of Troy, Ohio. And I will say this is, I believe, along 2980 Fenner Road. I misspoke earlier. This has been recommended for approval by the Troy Planning Commission. This will be the first reading.
Move to suspend.
We have a motion to suspend by Mr. Rozell and a second by Mr. Whidden. And Mrs. Knight, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Whidden and a second by Mr. Rozell to adopt the ordinance. Mrs. Knight, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
And our final ordinance of the evening, 044-2023. Mrs. Knight, would you please announce that?
Ordinance number 044, 2023, ordinance imposing moratorium for a period of 270 days on the acceptance of application for specific uses within the boundary of the Downtown Riverfront Overlay DRO District of the City of Troy, Ohio, and declaring an emergency. This is the first reading.
Move to suspend.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Pierce and a second by Mr. Schilling to suspend the rules. Mrs. Knight, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
I'm sorry, was that you as a second?
I second.
Okay. My left side is worse than my right, so I'm sorry. We do have a motion by Mrs. Snee and a second by Mr. Schilling. Mrs. Knight, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
And Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
Thank you. Moving along into communications this evening, Mr. Lutz, do you have the mayor?
Two items. I want to again congratulate Ms. Lewis on winning the quarterly award for Monkey for recycling. And second item is that August 11th through August 17th, Miami County Fair kicks off. And I hope folks can go out and make it and see all the wonderful animals and partake in all the
One
Couple
upgrade.
fried food as well.
Any upgrades in the future?
Director of Public Service and Safety, Mr. Titterington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One thing I do want to talk a little bit about, it's in the items of interest, but you might recall that council approved assuming some debt service and authorizing us to bid out for the expansion of the sewer treatment plant. About a $12 million project. It's been underway. Prior to it being underway, staff had submitted a grant application through the state of Ohio, one of the infrastructure programs. We were on the list, but we didn't get far enough up the list to fund it. And we had also, at the same time, put in for a federal grant as well. I believe I had reported our attempts at that time. And at the time, we were told the rules that were in place were that once we started the project, we would not be eligible to receive those grants. Well, unbeknownst to us, we continued to press the issue, and were successful recently, you might have seen, in getting awarded $6 million, or half of that project. I had a couple of inquiries about whether or not that would or could impact the 5-year rate plan that was put into place at the end of last year regarding the sewer fund. If you'll recall, we have 5% annual increases built into the fund. I am continuing to look at that. I don't want anybody, though, to get their hopes up because the project, as I mentioned, was a debt service project. So we're not using fund reserves out of the sewer fund to pay for that $12 million. Definitely would not be possible. The debt service repayment will be over I believe, a 20 to 25 year period. It is a state program, so we are set on our repayment schedule. Now, we will only have to borrow $6 million and not the $12 million, which is a good thing. What that does is it cuts our estimated new debt service, because we already have almost $200,000 in long-term debt that's part of our pro forma and part of the sewer fund. It should cut our debt service from about $700,000 a year to $350,000 a year. However, that's only I won't say a minor part, but it's a minority part. It's not the major reason for our need for a rate increase when we came back to you again at the end of 2022. There are a couple of other factors that have been at play and that justified you passing on that rate increase. First and foremost, since as part of any operation, personnel and operating costs are the vast majority of the expenses, between cost of living that is largely union negotiated, as well as the impact of all the inflation that we've been seeing through supplies and in the sewer program, that is chemicals. A large expense annually is our sludge hauling, which is a waste stream hauling and transport process, whose fees and expenses, particularly related to gasoline, have gone up because there are riders in our contract for that. Chemicals, as I mentioned, supply costs such as the replacement pipes and valves and the specialized equipment, those have all gone up significantly. The third primary component of the rate increase, so you have the debt service, you have the operating expenses, is our capital program. And over the next 5 years, our capital program, net of the sewer expansion project, is about $6 million. That capital program and the estimates were generated for the most part prior to the impact of the most recent inflation where we've seen projects come in at anywhere from 20 to 30% over what those estimates are. So one of the exercises that we're going to go through is to, and particularly since we're getting started with our 2024 budget recommendation cycle, generation cycle, is to relook at that capital program and make sure that our estimates are accurate. Because while the debt service will improve our fund balance levels in the sewer fund, the fund balances in the sewer fund have been much lower than the water fund. Water fund historically has been fairly, let's say, robust. However, in our long-term planning and the fact that we're not increasing rates in the water fund, that fund balance is coming down to the appropriate level. The sewer fund, over the next 5 years, we're trying to get to that appropriate level and maintain it at that appropriate level. So the debt service will help us meet that goal, and as we will look at the capital program in particular and make sure that that doesn't eliminate the positive impact of the debt service being reduced. So I don't want to set up any expectations, but I did want to be out front with that we are looking at it, and the best takeaway is that $6 million is not having to be borrowed and won't be long-term debt, and kudos to staff for being successful in getting that award.
The $350,000 figure that you mentioned, that is the service on an annual basis on that $6 million?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure.
In round figures.
I'm sorry?
In round
yes,
figures.
Right. And you've been in conversation not only obviously with the department head and all that stuff, but Mr. Friggy also?
Mr. Friggy as well.
Okay, thank you. Any council members have any comments off of that report?
No.
Okay. The Director of Law, Mr. Kerber, do you have anything this evening?
Mr. Phillips, I do not. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our auditor is not with us this evening, but I sit in for Mr. Lutz for Council President. I have nothing this evening, except for the county fair that I was going to mention. Staffing, I'm responsible for staffing the Republican tent this year, so that's been a real challenge, getting folks out there. So that was kind of fun. Any other council folks have any comments?
I just got two quick things. A couple weeks ago, attended the graveside service at the cemetery. The family was there. Most of the family graves were there. They had some other family members they were curious about. Seth did a great job, left, and went right back up to the office, got the map, came out, and they could locate two of their distant family members, so kudos to Seth on that. And then just to thank you, I know not everybody in every areas of town had a National Night Out. The one in Westbrook was sponsored by Mid-County Church. Appreciate that and all the efforts and whoever worked on that to get the people to Westbrook Park, as well as the other ones in town. I'm done.
Thank you. Any other council folks have any? Yes, Mr. Pierce.
I wanted to thank Sue Knight for all the work that she put into the Japanese exchange student program. We had 11 students, 3 adults, come over 7,000 miles, and we didn't lose a single one. That's real good.
And we did confirm they all made it back. So.
Yes.
Oh, it's your phone.
As soon as I say that,
Didn't realize it was mine. My hearing is bad, I tell you. Thank you. That's in attendance with that. Also, it was very entertaining for the students to come up and speak their particular things.
Thank you.
That was good. Any members of staff, anything for the good of the evening? Nope. Anyone in the audience that would like to come up and talk to us about whatever issue you may have for the day? Yes, sir.
I wish we could say that.
State your name and address, please.
I'm Steve Hendrickson at 975 Dickerson. Just want to remind everybody tomorrow, despite hiding it, there is an election that seems to be important based on all the ads I've seen on TV. and some of the truths and half-truths that are being thrown about. But anyway, everybody should go vote tomorrow. It's very important, and apparently looks like it's going to have a long-term impact on the way we do business in the state of Ohio. So anyway, just a reminder, everybody.
Thank you, sir.
Stole my thunder, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah.
Anyone else in the audience would like to come up and say anything? State your name and address, please.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Bradley Barron, 105 Crestwood Drive. Stephen did steal my thunder a little bit, but that's okay. That's okay. I want to talk about, piggyback some things as to what Mr. Hendrickson had to say. We've been hearing a lot of propaganda on both sides of the Issue 1 debate, and I'm not going to tell you how to vote, nor am I going to tell you to vote. Stephen already took care of that for me. But I want to put some thoughts into your memory bank for a minute about Issue 1. I want to preface this by saying that participatory democracy is one of the greatest things that we have, not in just our city, county, or state, but in our nation. It was a thing that was hard fought for over 200 years ago when we threw off the yoke of the British. Issue 1, to me, has been full of a lot of falsehoods. I'm just going to call them what they are, they're falsehoods. First and foremost being the fact that it's going to protect our Constitution from out-of-state billionaire public interests. And I want to tell you why. If you think that if this is supposed to protect our Constitution from out-of-state public interests, something to think about. Do you know that it is an out-of-state billionaire public special interest backer that is promoting this? Look up Richard Uihlein, U-I-H-L-E-I-N. He's a political megadonor out of Illinois. He's poured $4 million into the Yes campaign. Okay? Now, I also want you to think about this. Are you willing to give up your majority vote? Because Issue 1, if it passes, will take it from you. Now, what do I mean by this? Let's just say, and I said this at the last meeting I spoke on this, but I want to put it as plain as I can. If we have a vote that is 59% to 41%, whatever that issue is will not pass if Issue 1 passes. The minority will have obtained veto power over the majority. And I don't think any one of us in this room, or anyone in this city that hears this tonight would want that. Things to think about that they're not telling you. And as I said, I'm kind of disappointed that they had to use the red herring of abortion and guns to try to push this. Why not just come out and tell what it is? It's a blatant attempt to take away our rights. No more, no less. Just some things for you to think about. Thank you.
Anyone else in the audience have anything for us? Thank you. Come on down.
Good evening. I'm Christy Schell. I live at 1205 Hillcrest Drive in Troy, Ohio. I just want to thank everyone here. I know you've been getting some crazy random emails from me. But I did want to just kind of restate some things and to be open for questions just in general. So representing Troy Community Works this evening, but just thinking about the proposal that we will put forward, I think if we haven't made it clear, is in the hopes that we could help find some kind of resolution where a majority of us would also be happy. And I know we may be too far down the line, too far down different roads, but we are looking for that support if it is needed in the coming weeks as court decisions get made and things like that. So I just wanted to kind of reiterate, open myself up for questions and that kind of thing if there were any. And two, I think you guys have known, we've been trying to like stay as, in the middle as possible, but also offer solutions. And we're sorry that we're so late to that game, but we also wanted to, depending on which way all the things get decided, that we want to make ourselves available for a solution and to kind of help that along. So just kind of putting that out there. So, okay, thank you.
Just
Sure.
off of your last email and other communication.
Sure.
Did your offer, was it received by the building owner?
So we are still in conversation with them. We have had individual conversations with him, and there's some conflict between what his legal counsel is saying and what he's saying, so we're working on that. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Okay, so there's no absolute
There's no
resolution
absolute
on
either
his
way.
side?
No, not at all, yeah.
Right.
So, and obviously, it's very tumultuous on all sides, so we're just trying to kind of stay open and have those conversations as needed, so.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah. Any other questions? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience?
Good evening. My name is Deborah Pike. I live at 412 Ellis Street, Troy, Ohio. And I am here to say thank you, possibly to the council or the city of Troy. All of the confetti and the nasty pictures has been taken off of under the underpass. So I don't know who was involved in that, but I want to say thank the city of Troy for doing that. Next question is, how to say this? Okay, you guys have an ordinance somewhere, I think. I was trying to hunt it up and I couldn't find it, about dead trees on private property. I talked to a gentleman named Mark from the Troy Developing Committee. At least that's what the phone number came from when he called back. I have a dead tree between two garages over behind my house. My garage and my neighbor's house. That tree is dead. It's been dead. I have brought it up to the lady that goes around and looks for bad things in the city. And I might as well have been. So, it's got really bad. Last weekend, half the top of the tree came tumbling down on my garage. It had pulled the electric wire down with it. So, tree company will not cut it. Because if they take the weight off of my tree over on my property, it is possible it will damage his, which causes me to be responsible. That is what the tree trimmer told us. And matter of fact, that's what someone from the city had told my son and my brother, which owns the house. And so I had a problem. I called the city of Troy to see what we could do. Mark said he was going to get hold of Jeremy to confirm that the tree is dead. I mean, it's hollow in the middle. So now I'm afraid something else is going to happen. It's going to damage my garage. He has not called me back yet to let me know what Mr. Jeremy said. I tried to call him Friday. He had already left, and the lady told me on the phone that Mr. Drake does not deal with anything on private property. So if you guys have an ordinance about dead trees, it's a safety issue. If that tree falls, it's going to either hit my garage, his garage, or the neighbor's garage. Because it's really been there for longer than me. So I didn't know if anyone knew anything about that.
I'm not aware of any ordinance dealing with trees on private property. Mr. Kerber, maybe you know better, but...
No, I said I couldn't find it, so...
Well, and
Probably, I would guess that's because there is nothing on the books, because that is private property. And so that would be a property owner, or a civil dispute. It wouldn't have anything to do
Well,
with
the tree is
city.
actually on my neighbor's property. I hunted down last weekend,
Our
mark.
point is though, it is not on public property, and so the city would not get involved with that because it is private property.
So that Mark guy pretty much lied?
I'm trying to think who.
I can
there's
give you
one
the
Mark
phone
that I
number
know,
he
and he's
called
sitting over there,
from.
and he's shaking his head.
Yeah, he called me back,
I'm not aware of.
and he said that he would have to get hold of Jeremy.
Jeremy Drake, the park superintendent.
Yeah, Mr. Drake from the park thing. And then he, told me that he'd have to go down and look at it, and then they would get hold of the owner about taking care of it. So, I don't know.
We have a new arborist, if it's John? That's John Montgomery, that's not a Mark.
Well, that's what the guy said his
It's
name
got
was,
an
I'm
N
sorry.
in one of the names, but, and he may not have known since he's a relatively new hire. But we'll follow up with Jeremy and have somebody get back to you. But I'm not aware, and neither is Mr. Kerber from the head shake. He's a little gun shy of being on the
Well,
board here, but.
No, generally, the city doesn't get involved with it. If there's like dead trees on private property, the only time that the city may is if it's endangering a public right-of-way or something like that, or traffic safety, that's the only time. And then there's some mechanisms to get involved, but generally, with it being on private property, if it's on, I mean, that might be, you have a claim against your neighbor. I don't know if you've spoken to your neighbor about trying to be collaborative.
I
and getting
tried, and he
something
told
done.
me that it wasn't his tree, it was mine, and that I didn't know what I was talking about.
Well, and that, that might involve where the property line is and
I've got the
surveyors and-
property line dug out already. It's
Mhm.
string out.
Yeah.
I even tried to make it easy for them. So there's nothing the city of Troy can do, but you guys tell me what I can and cannot do on my property. See, that's the part I don't understand.
Well, you're talking about a couple of different things. One is a property maintenance issue, but when you're talking about trees and you're talking about...
Okay, wouldn't
where
that
the
be a
tree's
safety
located,
issue?
I'm sorry?
Wouldn't that be a safety issue?
I suppose
Because
it
if that
could
tree
be,
goes,
it's
it
not
catches my garage on fire, catches my house on fire, catches my car on fire.
That is, again, it's a private property dispute between you and your neighbor. It's not a public safety issue in that it's not, as Mr. Kerber said, if we had a tree that was on private property and it fell into the right-of-way, then we would get involved because now you're impacting the
Well, wouldn't it be
public
the
right.
alley be a right of way?
Do you have an alley back on Ellis?
Yeah, I have an alley behind my house.
Is that where the tree's at?
Yes, sir. It's between the two garages, between the alley and my property and his property.
Ms. Pike, we're not going to litigate this tonight or bring it to a conclusion. Mr. Titterington has said that he will contact Jeremy, Mr. Drake, and they will get an answer for you, and whatever that answer is what it's going to be. We're not going to be able to tell you here tonight what we may or may not be able to do.
Okay, one more thing.
Alley may be a factor that we need to look at.
phone number.
Okay, one more thing.
She wants your phone number.
Why don't you give that after you?
Yeah,
After
I
the
didn't
meeting.
get with Kate, I will. Thank you, ma'am. Oh my God, I knew I should have wrote this down. If you're running for a ward, like say, I want to go and run against Ward 4. Ward 4, is that it? Yeah. Who votes for that person that's running for the ward?
People in
Like,
the
you're head of like Mr. Pierce here, he's Ward 3.
people
So
in that
does
ward.
everybody get to vote for him being on Ward, or just the Ward 3?
Just Ward 3.
Registered voters in Ward 3.
Okay. Okay then. So I'll get to the tree is wait on you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Don't
Phone number.
leave before you give.
Phone number.
I'll get over here.
Anyone else in the audience have any comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you all for attending. Have a great week.